If you've stared at the Azure portal wondering why Azure Monitor, Log Analytics, and Application Insights all seem to do the same thing, you're not alone. The trap is treating them as three competing products you have to choose between. They're not. There are three layers of one observability stack, and knowing where each one starts and stops is what keeps your telemetry bill sane and your dashboards useful. In the next few minutes, I'll show you what each piece actually owns, where log analytics and application insights overlap, the cost and operational trade-offs, and a crisp rule for which to reach for when. Here's the layered picture. At the bottom sits Azure Monitor, the overall platform that collects two fundamental signal types from everything in your environment: metrics, which are numeric time series, and logs, which are structured records. On top of that, a log analytics workspace is the actual store where your log and trace data lands, and where you query it with Custo query language. KQL application insights sits one layer higher again. It's an application performance monitoring feature of Azure Monitor that today stores its data inside a log analytics workspace. So application insights is not an alternative to log analytics, it writes to it. Azure Monitor is the brand name for the whole pipeline. It ingests platform metrics from every Azure resource automatically, collects resource and activity logs, and gives you the cross-cutting features: alert rules, action groups for notifications, autoscale, workbooks for dashboards, and the metrics explorer. Think of it as the control plane for observability. You rarely deploy Azure Monitor, you configure it. The key thing to internalize is that almost everything you do, whether it's an alert on CPU or a query across application traces, runs through Azure Monitor's alerting and visualization engine, even when the data physically lives in log analytics. A log analytics workspace is where log data goes to be queried. It's a schema-on-read store optimized for high volume, semi-structured records, and you interrogate it with KQL, which is genuinely powerful once you learn it. Joins, time series functions, aggregations, regex parsing, all in one language. This is where you send your virtual machine logs, container logs from AKS, activity logs, network flow logs, and platform diagnostics. The workspace is also the billing and retention boundary. You set data retention here, you control access here, and crucially, the volume of data you ingest into it is the single biggest driver of your monitoring cost. Application Insights is the application-centric view. You add an SDK or enable auto-instrumentation, and it captures request rates, response times, dependency calls to databases, and a P is exceptions with stack traces and distributed traces that follow a request across services. It gives you the application map, live metrics, and end-to-end transaction diagnostics that raw infrastructure logs can't. Under the hood, a workspace-based application insights resource just writes its tables, like requests, dependencies, and traces, into a log analytics workspace, so you can query app telemetry and infrastructure logs side by side with the same KQL. So if application insights stores into log analytics, when do you think in terms of one versus the other? Reach for application insights when your question is about application behavior. Why is this endpoint slow? Which dependency is failing? What's the exception rate per release? It gives you purpose-built PM views out of the box. Work directly at the log analytics and Azure Monitor level when your question is about infrastructure and platform, host health, security and audit logs, cross-resource correlation, or custom log sources that aren't an app. The honest rule of thumb: instrument apps with application insights, collect everything else into the workspace, and query both with KQL. Operationally, the big lever is data volume, because both application insights and log analytics bill primarily per gigabyte ingested. A few practical moves: consolidate into a small number of workspaces rather than one per resource, so you can correlate and negotiate commitment tiers. Use sampling in application insights to cap telemetry from chatty apps. Set per table retention and move rarely queried data to cheaper archive tiers. And watch verbose diagnostic settings on services like Application Gateway or firewalls, which can quietly dump tens of gigabytes a day. Pricing tiers and commitment discounts change, so confirm the current numbers in the Azure Monitor pricing docs before you size anything. To recap, Azure Monitor is the umbrella platform for metrics, alerts, and dashboards. Log Analytics is the workspace and KQL engine where log data lives and where billing and retention are set. Application Insights is the application monitoring layer that writes into that same workspace. They're layers, not rivals. Your concrete next step: create one workspace-based application insights resource pointed at a shared log analytics workspace, enable a daily ingestion cap while you tune, and write one KQL query that joins an application request to its underlying infrastructure log. That single cross-layer query is the moment the whole stack clicks. And because tiers and features shift, double-check the current Azure docs as you go. If this helped, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one. See you in the next video.